Vamos a cerrar con una plática. Nos acompaña para este cierre Pascal Finette. Pascal es director ejecutivo del Instituto, Fastrack and Chair de Entrepreneurship and Open Innovation en Singularity University. Su trabajo se centra en el impacto de la tecnología y el liderazgo, enfocado en inspirar, educar y empoderar a los empresarios, corporativos y emprendedores para abordar los problemas más difíciles de nuestros tiempos. Liderazgo en tiempos exponenciales, el mundo de mañana no se parecerá nada al de hoy. En esta plática, Pascal presentará sus aprendizajes frente al crecimiento exponencial y disruptivo, además de la importancia de pensar en nuevos modelos de liderazgo. Pascal, bienvenido, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, there it is.
Well, good morning. I have no idea what you just said about me. I hope it was all nice.
All good things.
All good things, fantastic. How are you doing? By now you should have woken up due to the fire alarm. So let's see if we get through the next 45 minutes without a fire alarm. What I want to do today is I want to talk about the future of business. So we have done extensive research at Singularity University and particularly in my organization about where does the future go, and I want to take you a little bit on a journey. And before we get into all of this, and I understand that it is early in the morning, you probably didn't have enough coffee, I get that, it's the same for me. If you forget everything I say, which is perfectly fine, keep one thing in mind, which is that tomorrow will look dramatically different than today. And when I say tomorrow, I mean tomorrow literally 24 hours from now, not 10 years from now. And I'm going to show you why that is. But before we go to the tomorrow, I want to go to the past. Because the past is the only reference point we have, so we tend to go back to it and use it as a point where we base our future assumptions on. And there's something we call the real soon now fallacy, and it works a little bit like this. In 2013, 6 years ago, I used to work at Google. When I was at Google, we released this product. Quick question, so this is of course Google Glass. Anyone has played with Google Glass? I always find a few people, of course, first row people. So I used to work at Google. I was wearing Google Glass on the Google campus. This is a real picture of my parents, whom I made to wear Google Glass. And if you remember Google Glass, it had a couple of flaws. It was very expensive. The battery life was terrible. The features were pretty mediocre. And as my parents will attest, you look like an idiot when you wear it. Briefly, after I took the picture of my parents, this picture made the rounds. These are three of the most powerful Silicon Valley investors. This guy here is Mark Andreessen, who invented the web browser. When this picture made the rounds, we started calling people who wear Google Glass, glass holes. Now, I'm really interested to see how the translator is actually translating this. Good luck. So, 2018, so 5 short years later. So again, Google Glass is a terrible product, right? We can all agree. What the problem is with Google Glass is then it's a bad product, so you're dismissing it. You say, oh, it's not good, it won't be good. But 2018, something interesting happened. 5 short years later, our friends in China roll out this. They equip 18,000 people at their borders. So this is airports, train stations, border patrol stations, with a Chinese version of Google Glass, which looks and feels very much like Google Glass. But what this product does is, it does facial recognition. I look at you, and within 100 milliseconds, 1/10 of 1 second, it compares your face to a database of 100,000 wanted criminals and tells me visually if you're one of those or not. The first weekend the Chinese use this, they arrest 28 people. Now, this is Google Glass. This is the Chinese version of Google Glass. It doesn't look all that much different. Right? What has changed is AI in the back end. So the underlying trend, and when you come to Singularity University, this is haunting you in your nightmares, this graph. This is, of course, the exponential curve. Most technologies, such as computing, for example, moves on this curve. It doubles every time period. In the case of computing, every 2 years. When you draw this, it looks like this. This is what we call the hockey stick. Now, the challenge is this. When you stand someone where this friend here stands, and you look to the past, which is, again, the only reference point we have. When you look to the past looks always very flat and linear. But when you have the ability to look to the future looks really weird and crazy and steep. Ernest Hemingway wrote a book. It's called, the book is called The Sun Also Rises. In this book, he has got a quote. The full quote goes like this. How did you go bankrupt? Bill asks. 2 ways, Sam responds, gradually and then suddenly. Now, wow, that was a loud laugh over there. I don't want to look at your financials. Now, the important piece is technology has this tendency. Like technology, it takes a long time for technology to develop, but then suddenly it seems to hit and change everything. So we're going to explore this a little bit further today. Ray Kurzweil, one of our co-founders and one of the world's leading experts on artificial intelligence, 20-plus years ago wrote an essay called The Law of Accelerating Returns. And in this essay, he makes a very important point. And that point, I believe you understand. He said that the rate of change in many systems moves on an exponential curve. And again, I don't need to preach this to you, you know this. But I think what we still don't fully understand is the fact that the real change happens when technologies stack on top of each other and they start to enable each other. Here's an interesting example. This is population growth over time. The first time we exploded in our population was when we had the first agricultural revolution. This was the first time we used technology to allow us to create enough calories to feed ourselves without using, the whole day to do so. Now, that allowed us to have an abundance of time. And with that abundance of time, we start to invent new things. So we start to invent the steam engine. And the steam engine gives us an abundance of muscle power. And with that abundance of muscle power, we invent new things. So we invent electricity. And this gives us the electric engine, which allows us to distribute power wherever we want it. So technology stacks on top of technology. Ray Kurzweil has a very famous saying, and I hear a lot of people repeat this, but I don't think they understand it. Ray says that the change we're seeing in the next 100 years equals the change we've seen in the last 20,000 years. Again, a lot of people say this, I don't think a lot of people understand it. So let me make this super clear to you. Imagine we do something really crazy. We invent a time machine, and with this time machine, we don't go to the future, but we bring back an old friend of ours. So we bring back Jane Austen. Jane Austen lived in London in about 1700. And of course, you know her. She wrote a bunch of books, such as Pride and Prejudice. So imagine we bring Jane to Mexico City today. How do you think Jane Austen, 250 years later, would experience Mexico City? She would probably go mad, right? Like she would probably literally step out of her time machine, look around, see all this change, and die. So now imagine Jane somehow miraculously survives and takes our time machine, and then she has the same idea. She says like, wow, I want to do this. This is crazy. I want to give someone else the experience. So she brings back an old friend of hers, the Mona Lisa. And the Mona Lisa lived about 250 years prior to Jane Austen, of course. So she brings her to London in 1700. And how do you think the Mona Lisa will experience the world? She will walk through London and say, it just looks the same. The only thing which has changed is you have the steam engine. So for Jane Austen to repeat the same craziness, the stepping out of your time machine and dying, she needs to bring back someone who has not seen the agricultural revolution 13,000 years prior. Let me make this utterly clear. Do you remember this guy? Yeah, of course. It's like, I grew up on this guy, Marty McFly, Back to the Future. This was 1984, 1985-ish. This guy has not seen mobile phones. What you're doing there is magic to him. Like he has not seen the internet. He has not seen anything. And we remember this guy. The only thing which hasn't changed for him, luckily, is his car. Because this was his car back then. This is the car he drives today. Same car, luckily. Okay. So you have heard of Moore's Law. Moore's Law says the number of transistors on an integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. We know this. Computing gets twice as fast at the same price point. Now, Ray Kurzweil did something really interesting. He said, we know Moore's Law is true for 50 years. We also know that Moore's Law comes to an end. Just the physicality of computing needs to come to an end. So he said, I'm interested in a slightly different number. What I'm looking at is how many calculations can I perform per 1 second per $1,000. And then he looked at data prior to Moore's Law. He said, how stable is this trend over long periods of time? And then he plotted this, and this is a logarithmic plot, which is the reason why you see it as a linear line, though it's an exponential trend. And what he found is that Moore's Law is true for more than 110 years. And now it gets interesting. So we recently redid this graph, and we showed that the graph stays true until 2018 at least. We don't have 2019 data, of course. Now you can take this graph and do something really interesting with it. You can take this graph and extrapolate it into the future, determine what the future will look like. And when you do this, you can determine the point in time when you have a $1,000 compute device, literally your iPhone, which will have the raw compute power of a human brain. And that happens in just 10 years. In 10 years, you will buy your next iPhone or your Samsung phone or whatever you want to buy, and that phone will have the raw compute power of a human brain. And then it gets interesting. Remember, it doubles every 2 years, because then 2 years later, you've got 2 human brains, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16. And by 2050, 2060, you will have 7.4 billion brains in a single $1,000 compute device. Tomorrow will look dramatically different than today. I was recently with Munich Re. It's a large reinsurance company, and I was with their CEO. And I asked him a simple question. I said, what is your competitive advantage? And the CEO said, well, we employ 1,500 of the world's best data scientists. We are better than anyone else in the world at assessing and pricing risk. And I said, I believe you, because you're very successful at doing so. But you do realize that in about 20 years, that advantage is gone, because then I will have all your data scientists in my pocket. So you better get good at something different. So here's the challenge. Albert Allen Bartlett, who taught these exponential trends at UC Boulder, once said, the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. What he means by this is very simple. We make sense of this world in a linear fashion. We're really good at linear thinking. Exponentials, not so much. Let me show you. Imagine you took 30 linear steps, one step after the other. You know exactly how far it is. You know it is 30 meters. But more importantly, if I were to ask you, you have a feeling for it. If you were to go on the street and I would say, show me, you would know how far it is. Now imagine you take 30 exponential steps. Every step is twice as far as your last step. How far do you get? It's really hard, right? It's 2 to the power of 29. It's 1 billion meters. But more importantly, how far does it feel? How far is 1 billion meters? It's impossible. It's like most of us can't do this. It's 25 times around planet Earth. It's from here to the moon, back from the moon, halfway to the moon again. It shows you 2 important things. The first is linear trends get you to 30, exponential trends get you to 1 billion. More importantly, you cannot feel it, which means you have to sit down and do the math to understand this world. Now, if you plot this, exponential trends in technology, our linear thinking, we've got 3 important pieces. Point number 1, disappointment. Remember, Google Glass, it's not good, but you want it to be better, so you're disappointed. But eventually, technology gets good. And then you've got this moment 11 years ago when Steve Jobs gets on stage and shows you the iPhone. And you realize a phone isn't a phone anymore, a phone is a mini computer, and it doesn't have buttons anymore, it has glass. And then you get to chaos and amazement. It's like where you can't keep up with the changes in the world. The most important thing I can tell you is you have to change your thinking, because if you don't change your thinking, this is your path to doom. I want to talk about this a little bit more. I want to talk about disappointment a little bit more, and I'm not talking about crying hipsters. They're very funny to talk about. I want to talk about, so super quick show of hands, who here is in retail or has direct ties to retail? Okay, a few of you. For everyone else who's not in retail, use this as an allegory. This is a story for you because it's important to understand. I want to talk about this. Any one of you is using Alexa, Siri, Google Now, Cortana? A few of you. Okay. So first of all, let me just start with, this is magic. It is magic that I'm able to talk to my phone. This is Star Trek in the making, right? But most of the time, it's just not good enough, because most of the time, it sounds like this. Like this? No. Like this. Can we play the sound? No. Can we play the sound?
What time is my appointment on Sunday evening?
You have 4 appointments last Tuesday at 12 a.m.
I said, what time is my appointment on Sunday evening?
You have 4 appointments last Tuesday at 12 a.m.
I'm not asking about Tuesday.
I don't know what you mean by, I'm not asking about Tuesday. How about a web search for it?
So this is what we call the Siri fail. I mentioned to you, you used to work at Google. I've got, I think, 8 of these Google Home devices at home. And my wife and I love nothing more than just walk through the home and ask the device questions we know it can't answer, just to see how stupid it is. But here's the interesting thing. So again, it's very easy to look at these devices and laugh about them, right? Of course. But these devices are Siri is only 8 years old. It's a child. Now, of course, it didn't have time enough to learn. But what about if I tell you that these devices are currently doubling in their capacity every single year? They get twice as good every single year. So the question then becomes, how good will they be when they're a young teenager? Right? How good will they be in another 8 years? Now, you're exponential thinkers, because if you ask that question, just the normal person, what they do is the same math all over again. They say, okay, so from 8 to 16 is 8 years. They get twice as good, so 8 times 2. Now, you know that's not true. You know it's 2 to the power of 8. And that is 128 or 256, depending on where you start. Okay? Now, the question is, what does it even mean if these systems become 128 times as good? Now, you need to break it down to first principles. You need to say, what are they made of? And there are only 3 things. It's voice recognition, understanding what you say, cognition, understanding what you mean, and a bunch of services it connects to. You multiply this out by 128, and you will find that Siri and Google Now and Alexa in 10 years will be better than any human in understanding you. Let me repeat that. Better than any human in understanding you. And then it gets really interesting, because I tell you, if you run a call center today, your call center is gone. I was with Atento. It's the largest call center operator in Peru. I was with their CEO, and their CEO is very, very smart. And we stand in the center of their main call center. And they've got 12,000 people around him. And he says, none of these people will do first and second line customer support anymore. None. What I believe they should do is that he doesn't want to fire them. He wants them to do customer concierge services, really interact with the customer, but not, like first and second line customer support. I was with a German car manufacturer, and this is not an actual photo. They shall go unnamed to protect their innocence. And they showed me the car dashboard of the future. And it looked a lot like this. And they were so proud of it. And I said, this is great. When will it come? It had like buttons and screens. I said, when will it come? And they said, well, it's coming 2018, so it's now in production. And I asked them then, how long will it stay in production? I said, 8 years. And I said, it's gone. Because in 8 years, you will get into your car and you will just say to your car, play the radio. And the car will say, of course, Pascal, I know you love the 80s. Let me play some mariachi music for you. Of course. But here's the worst. This is by far the worst. Today, I can come to my wife. True story. I go to my wife and I say, honey, I forgot to bring the milk. Tomorrow, Siri will say, Pascal, I told you 3 times on the way home to pick up the milk, you damn liar. So even that is gone. But let me make this practical. This is Echo. The cheapest Echo is, I think, $29 US. 20% of searches, this is data from the US. 20% of searches in 2016 were already voice-based searches. on a mobile device. By 2020, we expect this to be 50%. 50% of all searches will be voice-based. And when you look at voice-based searches, something really interesting happens in the marketplace. So you take this. This is Energizer batteries. You might remember the Energizer Bunny. Did you have that in Mexico? Yeah, of course. This is probably the, next to Duracell, the most prominent battery in the world. Now, do you really believe that you will go to your Alexa and you say, hey, Alexa, order a pack of Energizer Max Power Seal AAA alkaline batteries? And of course not. What you say to Alexa is, Alexa, order batteries. If you do this on the internet today, that's fine, because you punch in batteries into Amazon, and they still show you Energizer batteries. But when you do this,
Alexa, order batteries.
what do you get? Well, I can tell you what they get. You get this. Amazon Basic Batteries. Now here's where it gets interesting. This is data from the US. It might be different in your country for sure. But just keep this in mind. 97% of all batteries being sold in the United States of America online are being sold through Amazon. Amazon sells basically every single battery which is being sold online is sold through Amazon. Already 20% of those batteries are Amazon branded batteries. This is the face you make when you're Energizer. Now, I looked at this and I was like, yeah, whatever, it's batteries, you know, bad for Energizer, but so what? And then you look at the data and then you see that Amazon has more than 80% market share in category after category after category. Skincare, athletic shoes, golf equipment. This is crazy. And then I looked at this and I was like, okay. There surely must be categories which are proof, Amazon proof. Here's a good one. I looked at diapers. This is Pampers, comes from Procter & Gamble. You care about diapers. This is the stuff you put on the naked skin of your baby. You care about this stuff. Well, turns out 50% of all diapers which Amazon sells, and they sell a lot of diapers, are Amazon branded diapers. This is crazy. And then I'm with these guys, ExxonMobil, and I'm in this building, and I do this talk, and there's a person in the back of the room, and he raises his hand, and I say, yes, what's up? And he says, I'm the person responsible for the lubricant business at Exxon. I was like, that's great. He's like, yes, it's 20% of our all of our all revenue. I'm like, good on you. You must be a very fortunate person. He said, well, yesterday Amazon started selling engine oil. So you might not care about this because you're like, whatever, it's Amazon, I'm not in retail, other people's problem. I guarantee you that there is an Amazon in your business. And if there isn't an Amazon in your business, there will be an Amazon in your business, so be prepared. For those of you who are in retail, do this experiment. I do this regularly with executives from retail companies. Go into a supermarket and go aisle by aisle and ask yourself the question, which of these products do you actually care about the brand? I guarantee you the answer is today 5 to 10%. Right? I care about my toothpaste for some bizarre reason. I care about the brand of my toothpaste. And pretty much everything else, I'm just fine. And pretty much everything else then will just come from Amazon or Tencent or Alibaba or whatever is the player in your market. But make no mistake, most of the time your interactions with these devices are still this.
Cuckoo! What is raining today? Water.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it answered.
What?
It said yeah.
You say yeah.
Yeah, it's her.
Oh my God. It's a woman?
Yeah.
I'm glad to meet
What
you.
is this thing?
Hello, Gugu.
Hey, you're okay.
There's something from the
Google.
Alphabets.
You have to say hey, Google, or okay.
Hey, Gugu. Okay, Gugu.
What's the
There you go.
weather?
Yeah.
What's the weather, ask?
What the weather? You want to know what is the weather?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
In Flagler Beach tomorrow, there will be showers with a high of 65 and a low of 56.
With this. It's a mystery.
What's it there?
I'm scared. I'm scared. It's a mystery. Oh my gosh. No.
This here is the future. This is us. All right. So I hope you will not forget this curve. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to deep dive now into something around this, the notion of disruption. So disruption is this interesting word which a lot of people use these days. If you're a consultant, it's your favorite word because you go to your client and you say disruption and they say, here's money. The challenge with this word is it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's, if any one of you is a vegetarian and you know tofu, or if anyone has ever eaten tofu, disruption has become tofu. It tastes like nothing until you put some sauce on it, and then it tastes like the sauce. So here's the first thing you need to learn. There's a very clear distinction between innovation and disruption, and I think people get this wrong all the time. Innovation is doing the same things, just better. So say, for example, you make washing powder, and your next version of your, like, say, Tide, product from Procter & Gamble, your next version of that washing powder is Tide White, and then you do Tide Super White, and then you do Tide Ultra White, and so on. And this is fine, because the market requests it. The market comes to you and says, I want something new. What's new this year? So you're doing something which you just make it better. Every once in a while, you do something new. So instead of washing powder, you do washing liquid. But it's not disruptive yet, because it becomes disruptive when you do new things which make the old things obsolete. So disruptive is when I make a washing machine which doesn't need washing powder anymore because it's using ultrasonic waves. So that's the first thing to remember. The second one is we looked up and down about theories of disruption. And there's Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, there's a few others, but there's no real good theory about disruption. And I believe the reason for that is because disruption is very complex. Now, what we have established is we think that there's three main forces, main thrusts, which lead to disruption. And I want to show them to you very briefly, and then I'll explain them to you in 1 second. So the first one is disruption is not a singular feature, it's not one feature. The second one is existing skills and processes are no longer relevant, which breaks your neck if you're an established company. And then disruption happens at the go-to market. Let me show you. I want to talk about these guys because everybody loves to make fun of Nokia. Everybody looks at Nokia and says, like, they're idiots. The iPhone, literally, the iPhone came out, 3 years later, Nokia is done. Right? And Nokia was, you remember this, right? The most amazing mobile phone brand. Now, I had the great pleasure and fortune to speak to quite a few people at Nokia because I never thought that, I could not believe that story. Because Nokia, clearly, these are smart people, they know what they're doing. So I asked a lot of executives who were at Nokia at the time what happened. And here's how this all stitches together. So this is what we call innovation. You build this product and you make it better and better and better and better and better, right? It gets a little smaller, the battery life gets better, the features get better. At the end of this line, you have this device, Nokia N95. I bought this, $400 US. This is March 2007. I was very proud of this phone. It had 2 cameras, you could take a selfie with it. The selfie was the size of a stamp. It had a little bit of the internet on it, but it didn't really work. But it was cool. But it had 2 weeks battery life. I mean, hello, 2 weeks. So this is March. And then in June, this comes out. And I'm asking myself, how can you go from this to this in 3 months? So I'm asking the people at Nokia, I'm like, how did you not see this? And they said, well, Pascal, you make a mistake because you think this is one thing, but it is not. This is a lot of things. So the smartphone is a different screen technology. It's a different processor. It's a different operating system. It's a whole bunch of sensors. It's a different way of packaging these things. It's a different way of putting emphasis on parts. For example, battery life isn't quite as important on this device. Disruption is not a singular feature. The smartphone is not a singular thing. And here's what happened. I talked to the person at Nokia who is responsible for screens. And he said, of course I knew these big screens were coming. Of course I knew that. And then I talked to the person who was responsible for the processor, and I said, didn't you see that these processors were coming? And he said, like, of course, we had them in the lab. And then I talked to the person who was responsible for Symbian, the operating system, and he said, of course we knew that we needed to do something. What they couldn't do is they couldn't put it together. Disruption is not a singular thing. It's really hard. The skill is not to see the singular thing. The skill is to see how the package can come together. And that's a very different skill you need to hone inside of your company. So this is number one. Number two is this. I'm going to show you a short video clip. This is a clip of, you will see in a second, Steve Ballmer. And you remember, Steve Ballmer was the CEO of Microsoft. And at the time, Microsoft had a mobile phone operating system, so they were playing in the game. And this clip was recorded about a week or 2 weeks after Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. And this is what Steve Ballmer had to say about it.
Steve, let me ask you about the iPhone and the Zune, if I may. The Zune was getting some traction, then Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
So whoever is laughing here, that was exactly my reaction. I mean, you look at Steve Ballmer and you're like, oh God, he's so stupid, and like he's a weird guy and whatever. But then I watched this clip over and over again. I watched this clip 50 times in a row because I was like, how can it be that the person who runs the most valuable company in the world at the time says something like this? And then it dawned on me. It dawned on me that he's absolutely 100% correct. He's not wrong, he's right. Because what he does is he compares the phone, the iPhone, to a phone. When the iPhone in reality is this. The iPhone is a computer. It's just like the different form factor. It's smaller, it fits into your pocket. Now the challenge with that is all your existing skills and processes at a company like Nokia are in making phones, not in making computers. Nokia did not get disrupted because Nokia got disrupted by another phone company. Nokia got disrupted because their existing skills and processes, everything they knew how to do, was no longer relevant. They knew how to create a product with a battery life of 2 weeks. It doesn't matter on the phone. They knew how to create a product which has really good call quality. Do you remember the first iPhone? It had really terrible call quality. Like the voice quality was terrible, but it didn't matter. This is what breaks your neck. I give you an interesting example for this. So I advise a couple of German car manufacturers, and Volkswagen, a company which has 350,000 employees, and they're really good at making a highly technical, very complex product, which is a car. The car, the combustion engine in a car, has 2,500 moving parts. It is a miracle that the cars don't like fall apart all the time. When you look at an electric vehicle, the electric vehicle and its drivetrain has 80 moving parts. You can build this cheaply just with normal workforce in China. Volkswagen has 350,000 people who are good at making a very complex product, which they don't need anymore. This will break their neck if they don't wake up to this. And here's the last one. If you remember how Apple introduced an iPhone, this is the Oscars of how you introduce a product. So thank you. Can we turn this down a little bit?
Thank you for coming. We're going to make some history together today. So, this is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. And here it is.
So contrast this with how you bought a mobile phone prior to the iPhone. So I don't know about Mexico, but this is the case in the US and Europe. You walked into a store, which was next to a store called Eye Candy, which I have no idea what they're selling. And you walk into this store, and there's an 18-year-old who has not showered for about a week, who is pushing a phone on you just because they get these subsidies from the carriers. And they don't care about who you are and what you need. They're just like, take a phone. Now, the way Apple sold their phones was this. You walk into this temple. It's glass and steel and wood. You go to this person who's called a genius, and they sell you the phone. I fundamentally believe that if Apple would have tried to sell their phones through the normal channels, they would have not been successful, not as successful as they were. Because the disruption doesn't happen in the lab. The disruption ultimately happens at the go-to-market. And this is like what a lot of people get wrong, because there's a lot of very disruptive products in the lab which never see the day of life. Because they never get out, they never get marketed right. So you combine all of this with a statement. This is Stephen Elop. He was the CEO of Nokia when the iPhone came out. And years later, they interviewed him and they said, like, Stephen, what happened? And he said, well, we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. So let me just tell you this. If you're the CEO of a big company and you just got your, pardon my language, your butt handed to you, never say this, never. This is stupid. You look just like an idiot. But the problem with Stephen Elop was he's a bean counter. He runs a company on a spreadsheet. So what did Stephen Elop do? He looked at Nokia and he said, where do we make money? And they made $1 billion plus by selling you phones. So where do they invest? Phones. They couldn't see the future. Contrast this with probably the best CEO we have in Silicon Valley, Scott Cook. He's a guy who founded a company called Intuit. He said that success is a powerful thing. It tends to make companies stupid, and they become less and less innovative. It's a very dangerous position to be in. I actually have very little hope for Apple. When I see Apple and what Apple has brought out over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I'm just bored. It's just like, so Apple announced a TV service yesterday. I'm like, yeah, it's called Netflix. And it's like, I don't care, right? They're too successful. You might have heard Jeff Bezos from Amazon, just about probably 10 weeks ago or so, he said publicly that he doesn't think that Amazon will be around in 10 to 15 to 20 years. And I don't believe that he believes that at all. But he wants to make sure that every single one of his employees knows that tomorrow is not a given. So here's the 3 parts we see which lead to disruption. It's not a singular feature. Don't get tripped up on this. Your existing skills and processes are no longer relevant, and then it happens at the go-to-market. Now, the good news is all of this is not complicated. None of this stuff I've told you so far, nor anything I will tell you for the rest of my speech is complicated. It's all common sense, which doesn't make it common practice, because it is really hard. It's really hard to do. And there's a lot of complexity in it, which makes it probably even harder. If you went to business school, you might have learned about the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps is, of course, unfortunately, it's not Pascal. It is product, price, promotion, and place. We learned this. This is 30, 40-year-old wisdom. Disruption happens at any of those pieces. The funny thing is, you go to a Silicon Valley entrepreneur today, they have never heard of the 4 Ps. They've never heard it. It's forgotten. But this is where disruption happens. And then the last thing I have to say about disruption is, this is Andy Grove, the founder of Intel. He said that only the paranoid survive. I think you have to have a healthy level of paranoia to not be tripped into this world where you're too successful for your own good. So with that being said, I want to dig, and this is my last part for today, but I want to dig into a particular form of disruption, which is the notion of abundance. So for the last, 2,000 years, all our business models, everything is predicated on the notion that whatever we sell, whatever we do is a scarce resource. There's only so much oil in the world, thus oil has a particular price. There's only so much labor I can bring up, thus my hour of labor has a specific price. This is changing. And that's a really interesting tendency. So you take, let me explain this to you. You take a record, a music record, this is a scarce resource. This record has real cost of production, it has real cost of distribution, from me to get it to you. It has real cost for you to store it. You turn this into a digital good, into an MP3, the physical properties change. Because now making a copy is free, sending that copy to you is free, storing that copy for you is free. The physical properties change, and with that, we now live in a world of abundance, and abundance leads to interesting outcomes. So much so that 75% of all music sales worldwide, 75% of all revenue is now streaming services. Here's an interesting example. This is a #1 hit in the US. The song was called "A Boogie with a Hoodie." I have no idea what that song is. But this song became #1 because it had 83 million streams on Spotify and all the other services, while only having 823 downloads. There's not even a physical copy of this song. This is the world we're living in. So when you have a digital good, the cost of creation, duplication, distribution, and storage go down to 0, which is interesting. But something else happens as well. Because you take something like our trusted compass, which tells us where's north, south, east, and west, and you turn it into a map, which is better, because now we've got terrain, and you turn that map into digital, you now get the map for free. But you also get features, because now you can measure where someone is on the map, and you can do routing and traffic information. So what happens when you turn a good into a digital good is that it becomes changeable. You can make changes on the fly. You can connect these maps with each other. I can see where other people are. I can create Waze effectively. I can measure it, and I can do this with software. I can do it programmatic. So the features go up into infinity. And of course, we know this to be true for bits. Anything which is digital, that's true. But we increasingly see it for atoms. So the reason for that is we see convergence happening. So you take something which is physical and you enhance it with something digital, and then becomes a whole different type of good. I give you a simple example. You want to manufacture a t-shirt. The way you did this in the past was, if you want to do it cheap, you send it offshore. You send it to Vietnam and have them sew it. There's now a company in the US which has created a robot which costs, I forgot what it is, like $2 million or so. It weaves a t-shirt. It spins out a t-shirt in like 30 seconds flat. It uses yarn, like cotton yarn, and the cost of making a t-shirt is 33 US cents. The marginal cost of these products, because they become digitally enabled, because we use these machines, becomes 0. So we see convergence happening. Now the big question for me is, in this new world, how do you make money? And I believe there's largely only 2 ways you can make money in this new world. One is, in a world of abundance, what we value is that what is rare. So you can create uniqueness and rareness. So let me show you. There is absolutely no reason, 0 reason, why a Louis Vuitton handbag should be $3,000. Now my wife disagrees, of course. But if you compare this handbag to a $500 nicely made leather handbag, it's no different. If you compare it feature by feature to a 10-cent plastic bag, no difference. Like, you carry stuff around. Now, of course, you pay $3,000 because brands matter, and they will continue to matter if they are well positioned. Of course, you pay this money. Downstairs is a Starbucks. I haven't checked out the pricing, but in Silicon Valley, a cup of coffee is $5 US. Which is insane. I can buy the same cup of coffee for $1 next door. But I pay $5 because what Starbucks has created is a social environment. Starbucks is what they call the third place. Home, work, Starbucks. We crave social interactions. If you can create something which is a social interaction, I pay for it gladly. If you walk into an Apple store, Apple stores are remarkable because they only sell you probably, 1,000 products? They're pretty empty. And those products you can buy anywhere. It's not that they are exclusive and you can only buy them in an Apple store. But the Apple Store to this day is the highest grossing store on a per square foot basis as a chain store in the world. And the reason for that is because they have created a temple. Like I go there to worship, right? This is like glass and steel and wood. And people crave experiences. So because people crave experiences, I'm happy to pay money. And here's the last one for this. I was recently in Berlin, and I had my foot scanned in an Adidas pop-up store. And 90 minutes later, I walk out with this pair of shoes. It's a 3D printed pair of shoes specifically for my foot. We are moving into a world where we see mass personalization. Now, of course, in digital, we see this all the time. In physical, it's still harder to do. There's no question about it. But we're starting to get there. And when you do personalization, when you create a product for one, it's unique. Of course I pay for it. So this is number one. Number two is you can embrace abundance and become a platform. Platforms largely only have three characteristics, main characteristics. The one is you need to give me access. The reason why Amazon was successful in the first place was they sold you 1 million books where everybody else only sold you 30, 50,000 books. So you give me access. Once you give me access, you need to do something else, which is you need to make it super easy for me. If you think about how you bought software only a couple years ago, you walked into a store, you bought this box, you took this box home, it was shrink wrapped, you opened the shrink wrap, there's a CD in it, you pull the CD out of the little sleeve, you put it into the drive, you realize that the CD doesn't work, you put it out, you put it back in the sleeve, you go back to the store, you complain. Today, 20 seconds. Because today you go on your Mac, on your iOS device, on your Android device, on your Windows device, you go to the App Store, you click, you have it on your computer. You need to make it super easy. And here's the last one. I think this is mostly misunderstood. Any one of you is using Spotify or, Google Music? Right, perfect. So I use Spotify basically since day one. I know the founders. And I keep telling them Spotify, so they advertise and say Spotify gives you access to 120 million songs. 120 million songs in your pocket. And I keep telling them that is utterly useless to me. The product is useless to me because I only remember 100 songs. So if Spotify wouldn't do something for me, I would play the same songs over and over and over again, of course. But what Spotify does is they curate. So on Spotify, I can go and say, this is a true story. So a couple weeks ago, I was with my wife and we made Mexican dinner at home. And I'm typing into Spotify, Mexican dinner playlist. And lo and behold, there's like 20 playlists, Mexican dinner. And I literally listened for 2 hours to mariachi music. I've never heard the music before. I've never heard the bands before. I didn't know any of the songs. Surely didn't know any of the lyrics. But it is there. So you have to curate. It's really important because if you give me access to the ocean, the world is an ocean, I need to figure out how to find it. So those are the 3 important points. Now here's the challenge. I believe that most of our businesses are stuck in the middle. They neither do this nor do they that, right? This is a dangerous position to be in. I think really we have to move out of the middle and we need to embrace either side. So let me end on this. This is Ron Shaik. He's a very good friend of mine. He's the founder of Panera Bread. It's a healthy fast food chain, very successful healthy fast food chain. He gave me this quote. He said that our approach at Panera has always been to discover today what matters tomorrow and then transform our company into a future that is unfolding before us. I think this is what we need to do as leaders. This is our role as leaders. We need to figure out what matters tomorrow. And you saw the session from Luis before. It's beautiful. He showed you what matters tomorrow. Like, we need to do this. And then we have to transform our companies into that future. Now, let me end on a question. And the question I have for you is, and I ask this question all over the world to audiences ranging from entrepreneurs all the way up to Fortune 500s. I ask them the same question all the time, which is, how much time did you spend last week or the week before to deliberately think about the future? And I guarantee you, most people don't. And I think that's a grave mistake. I actually think you have to carve out time of your schedule. And I understand your schedules are busy. My schedule is busy for sure. But you have to carve out time out of your schedule to think deliberately about the future. Lastly, so if all of this makes you feel a little bit like our little feline friend here, So you're taking all this like information into account, like you're taking the formulas, all the stuff you've seen earlier from Luis, like my stuff. You're getting ready to jump, and So if you're feeling a little bit like our feline friend, let me assure you, you're fine. It is totally normal, like we all feel like this. And an invitation for you, just as a last comment, is if you send an email, just an empty email to this email address, there's a little AI bot which will then send you back an email from me with all my personal information, my contact details, everything. But also it invites you into a community where we will share our latest research. We're writing currently a book on the future of business. So a lot of the stuff I showed you and much more we will release as a book. And as part of that, we're going to release a lot of the associated research. So that was what I had for you today. I hope this was not just entertaining, but also very helpful. I'm here a little longer for questions, and I just thank you for your attendance and your spirits. So thank you so much.